Welcome everyone to the Sacred Hockey Mask. I am Peter and I'm joined by Shasha.
Hello, I'm Lady Shasha, Mistress of the Snark, coming to you all the way from Orlando, Florida.
That was a lot more intricate than Tim used to do. My. That was... Tim would sort of grunt and maybe make a general noise and maybe tip a hat or tell a very, very bad joke. That was like... You've got a thing. You've got a... Like a little...
Yeah, that's how I do it when with Crystal when we do Coast to Coast Horror, because she usually says she's coming to you from Seattle, Washington, and I'm coming from Orlando, Florida. That's why we named it Coast to Coast, because we're literally on opposite coasts.
I don't disclose my location. Everyone knows where I am anyway, but I don't disclose my location because well, it's top secret and all the rest of it. I'm just kidding. It's Scotland. It's obviously Scotland, all right. Anyway, this is a horror movie podcast where we get together, we talk about a horror movie that we watched, and of course, with Screams After Midnight, the other show that I do with Tim, which is on hiatus, with that not being actively recording, there was episodes going out over the last 6 months, but because it wasn't actively recording, there was a lot of new movies that we didn't get to, and we're going to fill that void here on the Sacred Hockey Mask, starting with The Conjuring. The Devil Made Me Do It. And here's where I start my rant about movie series that start having numbers for the sequels and then just decide suddenly to stop doing it. Why all? You're too good for The Conjuring 3? You're too good for that? That's not... Come on!
It's like our conversation about The Purge, and I was trying to express that I was talking about the first Purge, but not the original Purge. Because you really want to say the first Purge is the original Purge, but then like the fourth one I think is called the first Purge, and it's just very confusing when you're trying to describe to someone else what movie you're watching.
There's almost a riddle there to trick someone with. What is the first and the fourth of something? Or I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, we're going to be Conjuring 3. This, went straight to HBO Max and theaters at the same time. It is, Lorraine and Ed Warren, both the actors are back. Although we did see both of them in Annabelle 3 as well, so I mean, we had gotten a glimpse of them since Conjuring 2. But it had been quite some time. Conjuring 2 was 2016. There was a 5-year gap. Now, admittedly, it got delayed like a year because of the pandemic, but there was a 5-year gap. But anyway, we'll start spoiler-free. I'll give you a warning before we move out to spoilers, so we'll have some general thoughts and just impressions and things. Briefest of backstory here. Enjoy Conjuring 1. Was surprised that I like Conjuring 2 even more. And I basically tolerate one or two of the spin-offs, but mostly hate them. Where do you stand, just quickly on the oeuvre of the Conjuring verse?
I like the Conjuring 1 and 2. I think that if I were me at 13 years old, I would have liked The Nun and La Llorona also, but my adult mind is like, nah.
yeah, not very good. And the fact that this one is directed by Michael Chavez, who was the director of The Curse of La Llorona, was not a good sign. I guess I'll say that the most positive thing that I'll say about my opinion on this movie is that I do think it's a better movie than Curse of La Llorona. I'll give it that, exclamation. But it is definitely the weakest of the three main films, I think, and it's not for the lack of concepts. I think there's some good concepts in this. There's some good ideas. Execution's a little bit up and down. Pacing's a little bit up and down. Some things just go a little too hokey for me, I think, in places. But not that there's not things to like. It's probably still better than... Yeah, all the spin-offs. I don't think there's any of the spin-offs that I would say are better than this one. So, I guess it keeps the hierarchy in place, where the main Conjuring movies are better than all the other ones. Not everyone will probably agree with me on that, but even this in its much, much weaker state is probably still better. Because even Annabelle Comes Home, which I would have probably said was the best of the spin-offs.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
How do you feel about this movie? What's your general sense?
I think it's fun enough. I was happy that I got to see it on HBO because I think if I paid movie theater prices to see this, I think I would be more disappointed. But for a direct to streaming, when you compare it to Netflix original movies or Shudder original movies, I think it holds up as far as its streaming competition. But it's definitely not the best of the series. But it's rare to have a part three that is the best, especially in a horror series.
I think you'll find Dream Warriors
Oh
exists.
yes. Oh yeah. I own that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Part threes tend to struggle a little bit, especially when the part twos seem to. And not everyone agrees with me that two is better than one. There's definitely there's two camps to that fight.
Well, there's some movies like Friday the 13th too. I'm sorry, I enjoy that one better than the first.
I think most people really do. I don't know. Does anyone really stick up as the first Friday the 13th as being like one of the best ones in the series? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like
I don't think so.
I think most people probably like 2, maybe 3, 4, 6. I also love 8, but you know.
Oh, is that when Jason Takes Manhattan?
That is Jason Takes Manhattan. Yes.
Yes, I enjoy that one too.
Not a great movie. It's not high art, but I have fun with it. The boxing kill, if you want to call it that, is delightful. Yeah. So Conjuring, Devil Made Me Do It. The basic premise of this one, and I will give it some points. I'll give it some points for trying to feel like it's a little bit different premise wise. Although it's one of these things where it kind of veers away, or it's like it tries to set up this unique premise for it, which is the Warrens are trying to prove that someone is innocent of murder because they were possessed when they murdered someone, and it wasn't really them. And it's like, okay, that's a little bit different. And what I kind of expected from this movie going into it was probably, okay, it's going to be like mostly after the fact, and we're going to probably get like the main story is going to be told through flashback, right? We're going to like start to hear the case, and we'll hear the arguments in court or whatever, and maybe it'll go back and show us the haunting and the possession and whatever. And it isn't really that at all. In fact, it almost makes you think it's going to do that at one point, because it goes back to when the family first moved in the house. And you thought, okay, so it's going to basically take the Conjuring style story, but reframe it around like here's the accounts of the events for in the context of a court case. But it never really goes down that path. It actually stays away from that for the most part. And it kind of gets a little bit murky where the Warrens are investigating something, and then there's other elements that come into it. I think it loses its focus a little bit, which is probably the biggest problem I have with it, is that it kind of like it really makes you want to care about this guy who's been accused of murder, but the movie I don't want to say it forgets he exists after a certain point, but he kind of stops being someone we see a lot at a certain point.
Yeah, it becomes the Ed and Lorraine love story, and I mean, we kind of got some of that in part 2, but I think they overestimated the audience's interest in that aspect of their story.
It's frustrating because I think it's the best part of the second one. I think it gave the second one a heart. This idea of like them caring about each other and being worried that something might happen to the other. Like that did add a bit of a heart to the second one, where I cared maybe a bit more about them than I did the family. But the family were still very important for the movie to work, and as them being there as like the heroes to save them, kind of thing. This one, because it does an okay job at the start of the movie where it makes you like Arnie, the guy who's accused of this. It gives you a little moment where he's with because he's not engaged, but he's like he's probably going to propose to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's little brother, this young kid, he's the one who's possessed. And there's a little moment where he shares with him where he's like, oh, he's actually like a really good sort of big brother-ish style friend to this little kid, and it sort of presents him as this sweet guy. He's kind of selfless a couple of times. It does a lot in the opening to make you care, and I think that's the right move. It's a smart move. If the whole movie's going to be about proving his innocence and making us care about him, then that's a good idea. But it was kind of weird to me that he kind of becomes a bit of an afterthought. Once we start to investigate what's really going on, yeah, we cut to him occasionally as he's sitting in prison, and there's a little bit of a stakes growing there with him, but it's not the focus in the way that it felt like it should have been. At the very least, it felt like it should have been more equal to the other stuff. And I think that's probably my biggest complaint, because I think there's some good scares. I think there's some bad scares that felt a bit ropey to me. There's a couple that I'll point out when we get spoilers there. Not bad
Hmm.
though. I mean, how are you on the horror like elements, the scary stuff, the
I
jumps and
think
whatnot?
that Michael Chavez's timing isn't quite on the level of James Wan's timing. But I give him leeway because he is a fairly new director. It's my understanding that La Llorona, or I'm sorry, The Curse of La Llorona. I should make that distinction because there were two movies that came out the same year with that title, and one I believe is a Mexican film that is a little bit more of a horror thriller, and that one is actually called La Llorona. And The Curse of I can't say it. La Llorona is the one that Michael Chavez directed, and I believe that was his first time directing. So this is actually only his second film. And if I'm correct, and this is only his second film, I could see why his timing isn't quite up to James Wan's just yet. Because with some of the horror scares, especially the type of jump scares that are typical in the Conjuring movies, you have to get that timing just right.
Yeah, Conjuring. If anything, James Wan's kind of an outlier just in general, and that he's quite good at doing jump scares. Most movies that try jump
Yeah.
scares aren't good at it.
Hmm.
There's a reason why most horror fans come out of a movie that's just jump scares and go, "Oh, it was just a bunch of shitty jump scares." We don't
Hmm.
there was no. Whereas James Wan, it feels like he's having fun with it. It feels like he's being playful
Yes.
with the audience, and he knows what he's doing, and he's like, "Ah, you're kind of waiting for it." And I'm not to say that there's no duds in Conjuring 1 or 2, but by and large, he pulls most of them off, and they're mostly fun,
Hmm.
and you feel like you're on a ride, and you don't feel like you're being insulted with like, "I gotcha" kind of moments.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of decent moments in this one. I think there's a couple that I'll point out when we get into the firm details. Like I say, I think it's a little too, because the movie is like almost 2 hours long, which for a horror movie is a bit on the lengthy side. And I would
Hmm.
say that it kind of does try to pack a little bit too much. Like there's something that I'm staying away from for spoiler reasons, which is kind of the one of the big core ideas of the movie, which I do actually think is a really cool idea. But I will say there's a lot of the execution that it's always frustrating because I feel like people who don't talk about movies and why they like movies too much, uh, don't really do a great job of differing between the idea and then the execution of the idea, because you can like the
Hmm.
idea and then not like how they try and pull it off, and that can be why you don't like the movie. To some people, oh, it has a thing, therefore I like it because it has a thing, but how
Hmm.
A is presented, is it uppercase, is it lowercase? This is a stupid analogy, but like that
No,
is,
I understand what
yeah.
you're saying.
So that'll be something I get into. I mean, I suppose as far as spoiler free stuff goes, they try and make it feel like a Conjuring movie. I mean, I don't imagine you have any complaints about the leads in this because they're playing the same roles.
No,
Yeah.
no, the two leads, it's Vera Farmiga and why am I drawing a blank on the gentleman's name? But they are always really good. The other characters, the young boy, the young man that eventually has to defend himself in court, they all did a very strong job. I think if I had a criticism, it's in some of the writing.
Sure. Yeah.
I do like that they tried to lovingly pulled from other movies. There was a lot of homages that we'll talk about when it's time for the spoilers that I think they did an okay job with kind of writing a love letter to supernatural horror.
Yeah, I was also pleasantly surprised. I won't say who he's playing because it's a lot. Well, it's not. I suppose not that much of a spoiler, but there's basically John Noble pops up as a retired priest at one point, and I like John. I'm a big Fringe fan, so it was nice to see John Noble pop up in there. Yeah, I have no complaints with the cast. I think Vera Farmiga, I've always enjoyed her work. I think she got a lot of shit after Godzilla King of the Monsters because her character in that was written like an absolute idiot.
Hmm.
um, so it's nice to see her sort of returning to this character again. It's and Patrick Wilson, who obviously plays Ed.
Yes,
He
that's the name.
yeah, he well, I mean, both of them carry a lot of these movies. They add a sort of central gravitas to the whole thing, which without that weight in the center, I think, because I think one of the most frustrating things about supernatural horror for me is when you have so many movies where characters who don't know anything about the subject and it can either feel forced when you introduce someone who, out of the blue halfway through the movie is like, I'm an expert on this stuff, I'm going to tell you everything about it.
Hmm.
That can feel forced. And it can feel very repetitive watching a lot of supernatural horror where you have the main characters who are just screaming wives and husbands and like, I don't know what to do with my baby, I don't know what to do with my child. And I think one of the things that The Conjuring has over these movies is because we focus on two characters who do this for a living. This is their prime stuff. This is what they know. They're experts in this. As experts as we. It doesn't feel cheap that they know their stuff, and it anchors it because we're not just following characters who are just clueless the whole time. We've got characters who can make proactive decisions, and that's kind of a big thing that's missing from a lot of movies like this, where they just feel helpless the whole time. Here,
oh yeah, and they don't waste the first half an hour of the movie with that one character who is skeptical about everything that's happening. The Conjuring movies typically, I think only maybe in the first one, maybe the first 10 minutes, there was one character that wasn't sure, and then something happens that shows him that what's going on. But they typically do not do that thing where some supernatural movies will have one member of the marriage will be the person that doesn't believe their spouse.
Usually the husband. It's usually the wife seen some spooky shit and the husband doesn't believe it. And he'll be doubting her the whole time. He'll come back from work and be like, "What? This was the crazy woman. You need to go see therapist. You clearly too much hard work. The kids are too much for you. You're seeing shit." and then it's like an hour out of the movie before you finally it's it's one of those tropes that persists. So I think just having a couple as a main duo who are both like paranormal investigators just really. I shouldn't even say paranormal investigators because I feel like paranormal. I mean, it is paranormal, but it feels kind of more scientific than their approach, which is a bit more, I don't know, occult and demonic and religious. But yeah. So I think we should say in spoiler-free stuff. Probably not. I think we're probably at the point where we're about to delve into the spoilers. So I'll give the spoiler warning here. Full spoilers for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And we will just start at the beginning, I guess, in terms of like talking about specific moments and things that we want to bring up that'll... So, I will say, I think the prologue section I thought was quite strong. It actually... If anything, it lulled me into a false sense of security that maybe the reputation that I've heard about this isn't that warranted. This feels, get it, warranted. I wasn't even an intentional pun. It clicked in my head after I said it. Anyway, mainly for a couple of reasons. You know, it cuts straight into the house. The kid's possessed. The Warrens are there. They're trying to do the thing, and. Like I said, it shows you some moments where Arnie, who is the sister's boyfriend, tries to be nice to him, and Chloe's good friends with the kid and is kind of selfless. But I thought there was a couple of nice horror moments here. There's the way the kid contorts is a bit more extreme than most movies, but not so over the top with bad effects that it made me go, "Oh, this is stupid."
Oh, I saw some behind the scenes footage, and they actually hired this young lady. She looked to be maybe a preteen, like 11 to 13 years old, and she's an actual contortionist. So it wasn't CGI. They just hired a contortionist, and they just superimposed his face over hers.
That will be why it didn't look. Cause I feel like I've definitely seen other exorcism movies or whatever where they'll do this, but they'll do it with CG, and it'll just look like shit. you know it's fake. It doesn't have it doesn't get the feeling you want from it because it just looks so artificial. But clearly this worked because I actually thought the contortion looked good, and I thought a couple of moments with the kid in the bathroom as well, where. Like a demon's hands kind of look like the rungs on the shower curtain.
Rings.
Yeah, I thought that looked pretty good. It was nice and subtle until it started moving, and it was like, oh, that was nice because it was always there. So now I feel like, oh, that was always sitting there. So it's a bit of a fun horror thing. And then the way the kid kind of charges at the dad with a knife, I thought was a neat little moment. And I thought, okay, this is okay. But this is all the setup. The setup is that Arnie basically says to the kid, "Take me instead, let him go." So again, making his like him. He's being selfless. Of course, Ed Warren, who's just been knocked against the wall and is basically having a heart attack, is like, no, don't be a fool. You're much stronger than the kid. You'll do much worse things. Don't do it.
I actually laughed when the little kid charged him with the knife because for some reason he kind of reminded me of Chucky because he's so little. When he's running with a knife, it just made me think of Child's Play.
It's this funny thing where obviously the kid like might not have been the intended target of this
Mm-hmm.
curse, because well, obviously he's much smaller, he's not as strong as everyone else, so they can kind of
Mm-hmm.
overpower him fairly easily.
Mm-hmm.
So as a demonic soldier, if you want to call him that, he's a bit
Mm-hmm.
under par as far as what he can
Yes.
accomplish. But yeah, but this is just the setup because from here, Arnie's the one who's got the devil in him, effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and he ultimately ends up at killing like it's like his girlfriend's landlord slash boss. He basically sees him being evil when he's not. He's he the demon makes him see him attacking his girlfriend, but he's not. They're just kind of dancing and being stupid. And it leads to him stabbing him a bunch of times. That's kind of the setup. Joe, the sad part is about all this is that I really like that opening prologue, and I think it's one of the better just sort of pure sections of the film because it felt like there was not really much with it that I think is wrong. I actually do think the structure of this film is wrong, and unfortunately it would mean either losing this or not having it till much later. But part of me was thinking
Mm-hmm.
after he stabbed the boss, and he's like wandering down the road, and he's just kind of in like a zombie state, and he's carrying the knife, and he's got blood all over his shirt, and the cop pulls up next to him, and like, and it kind of cuts from there. Part of me was thinking, especially when we got to the movie got going,
Mm-hmm.
and it became what it was going to become. I thought, why didn't we start there? Why didn't we start with just this really ominous shot of him walking down the road, and then discover
Mm-hmm.
what he's done in hindsight
Yeah.
as we have them talk about it and like flash back to things again? And maybe it's just my expectations of expecting a movie like that, but they kind of do it a little bit where after he gets arrested and they ask that this we have to look at the case again, and I genuinely thought that we're going to do a series of flashbacks going through the entire
Mm-hmm.
time that this family spent in the house, but it ended up just being one little scene of the kid
Yeah.
when he first goes in, lies in the waterbed, and spooky stuff happens.
Yeah, we didn't really get to know the family very much at all.
No.
And what you were saying about the flashbacks and expecting it to be, especially since it's centered around a court case, I thought it would be a little bit more similar to the structure of is it The Possession of Emily Rose?
Oh, The
Is that the name of it?
Exorcism, I think, of Emily
The
Rose.
Exorcism of
Yeah.
Emily Rose, where that was centered around a court case, and then there was flashbacks to what happened initially. I thought the structure of this was going to be similar to that.
When it flashed back to the scene, I genuinely thought, "Oh, this is where it's going to start doing this. Okay, that's cool, right?" And we're going to get all the hints and teases of like what led to what we saw at the start. But it didn't turn out to be that at all. It led to them finding this, demonic like not
Totem.
Totem, yeah. There's a charm or like a demonic charm that was left under the house, which is someone's put there to curse someone in the house. This is it's a Satanist, and conceptually, I do kind of love this. I love the idea that there's a human villain behind what's going on in this, because that's very different from the first two. That's a very unique thing to add into this the idea that there's almost a villainous version of the Warrens out there who is using this for their own gain, for whatever reason. I think the sad part of this is that I don't think the actual villain herself was that compelling, and
Yeah.
I mean, just to skip ahead here a little bit, but her turn out to be the daughter of a character that we met once halfway throughout the film felt really convoluted and lackluster to me. I don't know about you. I mean, how did you feel about that?
I thought it was just kind of like an easy cheat, but also I don't know whether James Wan wrote this. I'm not sure who the writer of Conjuring 3 is.
I can tell you. He gets a story by credit, but he didn't write the screenplay.
Okay. I do like how in James Wan's movies that there's a lot of times it's a female villain, whether it's Mary Shaw from Dead Silence or the woman that I think she turned out to be a witch in why am I drawing a blank?
Insidious?
Insidious. Yes, Insidious. with the black outfit on. The nun, I love how he brings us like these female antagonists, and she was another one, but although she did kind of remind me of Mary Shaw in the way she presented herself. So I feel like a skinny older woman must have scared James Wan when he was a child.
He had a horrible experience as a child where especially it was probably someone in a sort of old timey dress, and she's really scrawny,
Yes.
and she scared the shit out of him. And yes, that's probably a good guess. Actually, he probably had a nasty experience with some old woman. I think when because the first time we see her a couple of times, it's actually, we don't know what she is yet, and it's just that Arnie sees her in a ghostly kind of way a couple of times, where he sees her like behind him or at the window when he drops a chainsaw. It almost hits someone. Which don't cheese me a chainsaw landed on someone movie and then don't give it to me. How dare you? But this was the first time in the movie where I felt, oh, that was kind of bad. Like it's like a scare moment. Like when he turns around and he sees this woman staring at him, I thought, that was a bit weak. I don't know, because I like the idea of this being like an arch nemesis for particularly Lorraine, because Ed in this movie, because of the heart attack at the start, he's kind of weak. He's got a walking stick, and he's constantly, we're constantly reminded that he's got a bad heart now, and he needs to take his medication, and so he's kind of the one that's at risk. So it kind of makes Lorraine the one, because he's always hesitant to let her do the thing where she goes and touches something to like get the psychic vision or whatever, but he ultimately always lets her, but he's always hesitant. He's always a little bit worried for his wife. But of course the spin on it is that now he's physically weak. He's physically incapacitated, and she's the one who kind of has to take charge. So the idea of giving her an arch nemesis who is going to go after Ed, because it is going to be this kind of, because I think that's the part of the movie where basically she psychically connects with one of the bodies that was previously a victim of this woman, and she kind of has a conversation with her through this psychic connection. I thought, I like this conception. I love this idea. I love the idea that now they have the Satanist attention, and now they're going to be arch rivals, and that's indeed what happens. She sends a totem to them, and Ed almost kills Lorraine at one point, and that's a really fun idea. It almost just feels though, by the time we get to this point, that it's forgotten about Arnie. By this point in the movie, Arnie's like, oh, he's back at the prison. He's almost getting possessed to kill himself a couple of times, but it really is nothing. It's like off to the side where you don't. And it did such a hard job at the start of trying to make us care about him that it just didn't feel kind of. It was almost like it was just like banking on his like caring about him for the rest of the movie, but you kind of have to keep him feeling important. And I don't think they did.
There was some scare scenes that I think came off as more comic than scary. Like when he was in the prison and that one prisoner sits up and starts singing "Call Me." And I'm sure that was meant to be very scary, but the way he sang "Call Me," it made me giggle.
Joey, he looked like actually? He looked like Sean Bean with long hair to me, that prisoner. I got Sean Bean with long hair. But not that Sean Bean's never had long hair in a movie or anything, but they look like Sean Bean with long hair. Unfortunately, conceptually I loved it, because there's a couple of scares I like. So the way the movie flows is they start investigating the case. There's a funny line with the defense attorney who doesn't want to like bring in possession or the devil into the court case, and Ed says, look, why don't you go over for dinner, and if we can prove to you that any of this is real, come over, see her room, meet Annabelle. And it does this, and this is something that they can only do because it's the third movie and they've established all this. But when she says, okay, let's see what you've got, and it just cuts to her in court pleading that the devil made them do it, it's like, it's funny. It's a funny cut because you get, okay, we know what it's like for people to see inside that room, and we see, we've seen Annabelle, we know all this stuff. That's cool. But they end up going to a police station where there's been some missing girls, and they found one of these totems nearby, and the Warrens have to prove that Lorraine can help, that she has got some psychic powers. The detective's reluctant, but takes her out. And there's a couple of jokes where she like guesses something or says, "You missed a turn, it's back that way," and he's like, "What? That's spooky shit." Like, But they go out and she sort of plays out, and it turns out that the one girl murdered the other one who was her best friend, or possibly even her girlfriend. I wasn't actually sure if it was a romantic relationship or not, but and she kind of plays through it, and she almost runs off a cliff, which that felt a bit hokey to me. It was just like, let's have some danger, where she almost runs off a cliff. But they go to the morgue, right? Because Lorraine has this idea. She has this idea that if she can touch the body that they found, because she's basically psychically discovered where this body is, and the police have been looking for it. If she can touch the body, maybe that psychic connection to the Satanist is still there. So they break into the morgue, they go and touch her, and I thought there was actually a fun scare here, where one of the other bodies is basically brought up to life as a sort of zombie figure from the Satanist to attack Ed. because Lorraine's like in a trance. She's like, tethered to the body, and she's talking to the Satanist, and they're doing the, it's basically Loki and Tony Stark. I've got a Hulk. They're doing that scene in the context of The Conjuring. But Ed's like running away, but we know he's got a bad heart, so he's kind of hobbling, and he's falling over, and he's breathing heavily. I thought one of the things that I think a lot of modern horror movies struggle to do is let silence be the tool. They overdo it with the noise, and I think the way this it's a really, let's just call it, he's a fat guy, right? This fat corpse. But the way this fat corpse is in like silhouette in the darkness, and there's like no music, it's just like a ticking of the clock you hear as Ed's looking at him. It's effective because it's a simple shape. It's something more. What's the word I'm looking for? It's less supernatural. I mean, even it's supernatural that there's a body's gotten up. But in the previous Conjuring movies, it's not like, we had spooky demons and spirits who would do things. We'd see the crooked man or the nun, but they were all ghosts or something akin to a ghost or a demon. This is a physical body that has been brought up and standing in front of him, and it's in your face. It's more obtuse. It's more invasive. It's affecting the laws of the real world. And I thought that was an effective moment in of itself. I didn't think it was effective later on when he showed up again at the house. I thought that kind of weakened it a little bit. But
speaking of sound, the footsteps of that cadaver running towards them was also very effective. I was listening to it in surround sound, and you can hear the footsteps started in the back speakers. And then you could hear them switch from the back speakers to the front speakers as he's, running around and getting closer to Lorraine. I thought that was really good sound design.
Yeah, the sound mix and the music as well does feel, probably on par with the previous movies. Sadly, it's the sort of thing that it can't save the script, it can't save the ideas, but it does help a few of the moments in particular, I think. So, no, I thought that moment was good. I like the idea of this. It's just unfortunate the actual character herself, the villain, I found very underwhelming, especially when it turned out to just be John Noble's daughter, who was this priest who used to, basically hunt down all the stuff the Warrens do. But his daughter became like fascinated by it when she was growing up, and then eventually, because it does that thing where they're trying to figure out who sent the thing, who sent the totem to her house, and almost made me kill my wife. And it's like, well, when Lorraine was in the vision with the woman, she heard some water and she heard some train tracks or something, and basically he realizes this could be that guy's house because when they visited him, he's right next to the water. This is where he is, blah blah blah. And Lorraine goes out, and it turns out this guy himself is not evil. He wasn't forthcoming about his daughter because he's obviously very conflicted about it. But in fact, his daughter kills him. His daughter shows up and murders him, like right after he lets Lorraine into the secret underground religious tunnel system that exists.
I like that they included the tunnels because a lot of people don't know this, but in the United States we do have those tunnels. They're all over in different states, and they're no longer used, but they're like hundreds of years old. I don't know what their initial purpose was, aside from there were some that are specifically the Underground Railroad, where slaves that were escaping southern states and trying to make it to the north or to Canada would use them. But there's others that they didn't even know about that predate that. They go back to like when there was only natives here. So it's a very interesting thing that we don't see these tunnels in more horror movies because we have them all over the country.
That's interesting. I didn't know about that. I kind of rolled my eyes at this a little bit and said this is all about Hollywood, but fair enough. If it's a thing that actually exists, I won't. I think there was a couple of moments where they were going through the tunnels and there was like books stacked everywhere and there was all this religious iconography, and I thought,
yeah, that stuff is added.
Yeah,
those tunnels are just empty.
Okay, in that case, I don't feel so bad then for rolling my eyes because it felt really designed and really like, because the way they explain it in the movie, John Noble says that, oh, this is where they sent all of the spooky shit that they didn't know what to do with. They just hide it in this like cavern that we've got under the house.
And I will give The Conjuring and The Conjuring 3 points for authenticity for how it feels, because I'm from Connecticut. I'm from the state where this takes place, and they did a great job of giving you that Connecticut feel. The houses look like Connecticut houses. The landscape looks like Connecticut. I thought they did a really good job, because sometimes they'll say they're in Connecticut, but it really feels very Toronto or upstate New York. In this one, I think they captured how Connecticut felt well, especially since I grew up in Connecticut in the 80s, and this takes place in 1981. My one criticism as far as the filmmaking specs is the muted colors. I don't like when they try to do a period piece and they mute the colors. I For some reason I think psychologically it makes it feel like it's an older movie, but then you go back and you watch something from 1981 and it's very vibrant looking. The colors are not, it's not sepia.
It's actually more colorful. I mean, the comparison that I would bring up is Star Trek. You go back and look at the original Star Trek, and everyone's in primary colors, and then you look at the movies, and it's like everyone's in the grays, and well, not all of them. I mean, they switched to red, but like they went for more. No, I agree. I think it's because we associate black and white with old, so they drain the color a little bit because it makes sense in our heads. It's a bit more sepia, so it feels a bit older. But in actual fact, movies or clothes were far more colorful, at least.
Yeah.
And those, obviously, I mean, everything. I mean, obviously, the trees and skin tones were all as colorful as they always have been, which is also is affected by this. It's not just clothes, but the clothes are the thing that stick out because the clothes are the things that are actually wear more colorful in real life than they probably are now. I mean, not that no one wears colorful clothes now, but they stand out a bit more now, I think. When someone walks down the street in a bright yellow and red tracksuit, it's like, they stick out. They've got cojones on them because they feel like they want to make a statement with that outfit.
A great comparison would be this movie takes place in 1981. Poltergeist was released in 1981. And look at how colorful and vibrant Poltergeist is. Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think one of the funny things, because you brought up the authenticity of it feeling like the right state and to a point in the time period, is that that's actually one of the things that myself and Tim, well, more me, because obviously Tim, I don't think Tim's ever visited the UK, but I made sort of a similar statement about Conjuring 2, was that, I mean, I've never been to specifically the area that's in that movie, but the UK is pretty similar, in all the urban areas, for the most part. And I think one of the things that was really stuck out to me in Conjuring 2 is that the house looked like a British house. It looked like because I'm so used to like horror movies with like ghosts, especially and demons. It's always in a big single family house that no one can afford these days. Maybe in 1981, sure, but not today. And this felt like, no, this feels like a bit more cramped. It feels more like half of a conjoined house in the UK. It felt like a really unique setting for a horror movie on top of just being a little more authentic. What's funny is I tend to associate the UK with having a fairly drab color palette. So maybe because it's just not as sunny as often, so I tend to associate it with a lot more just dull looking things. So maybe the color scheme, that almost slightly wet looking like palette works.
You know what, now
movie.
that you say that, I might have to take back my muted color thing because I've been in Florida for 10 years and everything is very bright and sunny here. Connecticut has a very similar weather to England. Well, that's why it's called Southern New England.
Yeah.
Because in addition to everything being named similarly, like we have New Britain, New London, we also have Manchester. So that's why they call it New England.
I can't believe you listed all those and didn't say New York.
Oh yeah, well that's not New York is technically not New England.
Well,
New
no,
York
but
is yeah.
But there's a York and then
there is a York and it's a New York, yeah. But the weather in Connecticut would be more similar to England. It's very rainy. It's not as bright. It's not as sunny, and except for maybe 2 months of the year we get bright and sunny, and the rest of the year it is kind of gray. The sky is literally grayer in Connecticut than it is in Florida. Florida, the sky is super blue.
Yeah.
And since I've been here for 10 years, I forgot about the gray skies of Connecticut.
Joe, I'm just remembering. I was wanting to introduce you as a genuine Florida woman, and I forgot to do it.
Yeah,
Damn it! I'm going to hold
transplant.
that. I'm going to hold that for next time. Don't you worry. There'll be Florida woman jokes happening, people. Make no mistake. There's a whole. I love after, because Florida man became a thing, and then Florida women got tacked onto it, and then at one point I saw Florida teen as a headline and went, there's a whole family of like really messed up superheroes. This is very impressive. Anyway, so no, I think because the core at the end of the movie is that Ed once again is being possessed because he's been cursed, right, by this point. And the whole like tenor of the movie that's going to make us care is that Lorraine is going to break through to him, and the power of their love is going to snap him out of it enough to A, not kill her, but B, destroy the altar, which, I mean, it's a simple fix. I mean, when they say all you have to do is destroy the altar and it'll break all of her curses, like, it's a little easy, that part. Like, it feels a little bit simple, but I'm not saying it should be more complicated than that, especially given everything else. I think, again, conceptually, I think that's fine, especially since we do care about those two characters. I think they were the heart of the second film. I think it makes sense to kind of make that be part of it. I just kind of wish that it felt like Arnie was still as important by that point in the movie, and not just. I mean, yeah, he's at the prison, and he's kind of like floating, and like his girlfriend's having to like hold his hand with this holding a piece of glass to stop him from killing himself, and like, they're doing stuff with him, but it definitely feels more like the subplot. But once we get past the first half hour, he's subplot man, and then it's Ed and Lorraine, and I'm okay to stay with them because they are the heart of the movie, they are the stars of the movie, they are the main part of the movie. I guess I just wasn't expecting it to be them investigating things in present day as much as I was. And yeah, and you add that with maybe like, because there's more of a focus on that part of things, you've got a villain that I think's a bit weak, and then of course you've got like the Arnie stuff's not as focused on as enough as it should be. It all feels a little disjointed compared to the others, and it feels a little bit less whole and satisfying than the others. Even though I think there's individual scenes throughout, there's a lot of ideas I like throughout the film, but it's definitely. I think you can tell. I think you can tell. I mean, I think the story ideas are still good because, as I said earlier, James Wan's still credited as like story by, but he didn't write the screenplay. And I think him not being the one who actually guides the actual screenplay and then actually directs the movie, I think all the differences we're seeing are from that. Michael Chavez at least proved that when he's given some ideas, some of them will turn out okay with him directing. Unlike La Llorona, where all of it was just terrible, and I hated like every second. It was boring. It was a dull, boring mess.
I like the scene with the swimming pool and the umbrella. I thought that was executed well. I thought that was cute.
I'd love to tell you I remembered it.
It's when the little girl had the umbrella, and every time she put it forward, she could see La Llorona, but then when she put the umbrella back up, she couldn't see her. It was a nice jump scare. I like that one.
Okay, that creative. Sounds vaguely familiar. Now that you're saying that. Okay, I watch a lot of horror movies. Okay, they can't all rest in my brain. Some of them have to move on.
Speaking of lots of horror movies, let's talk about the homages.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The movie opens with that beautiful Exorcist homage, where the priest is getting out of the taxi and he pauses in front of the house. Just long enough to set up that similar shot.
The silhouette.
When he gets in the house, he turns into the priest from Amityville, or was it Amityville 2? Whichever Amityville where the priest was in the bathroom with all the flies. He kind of reminded me in his movement and how he spoke of that priest from Amityville. And then
maybe you'll tell me, but I felt like when the kid's lying on the waterbed in the flashback and the face kind of comes up from underneath, that reminded me of something, but I couldn't have told you what.
Nightmare on Elm Street 4. That's how Joey was on the waterbed and he sees the lady in the water. And then the lady turns into Freddy and gets him.
I wonder if this one's... Because the Exorcist one is definitely intentional. There's no way that Exorcist homage is not 100% intentional. This waterbed one, like, if they tell me they're Nightmare on Elm Street 4 fans and this was a fun little like throwback, I'll be like, oh, that's cool. But I can also believe this is just something similar that makes us... Because there's only so many, killer or spooky thing comes out of the water in the waterbed and grabs someone. But... You're right. That is what made me think of. I think I was thinking Nightmare on Elm Street anyway because there's a face coming out and the hands coming out. Because I think I didn't like it as much when you could see the face underneath.
Yeah.
But I liked the first part where the hand was making just like you could see like a lump come up. That to me was a bit more effective. I think for me Supernatural, it's when it gets too overt and it's too like in your face. It starts to lose its charm a little bit. I think when it's just something simple and subtle.
Yeah. One of the scariest moments in the Conjuring, the original Conjuring, is when the little girl is sitting on the bed and she's talking about seeing someone behind the door. And we, the audience, we can't see anything behind the door, but it's so creepy because you're anticipating what is it that's behind the door? What is it that you're going to see? That was executed so well.
Actually, I will say one of the things that this does have, not consistently, but there are some moments that reminded me of the Conjuring 1 and 2 in terms of... Because Conjuring 1 and 2 are very good, and that's a good example you just gave of letting just like you kind of like tease an idea, and you have a
Mhm.
character just kind of like sit there waiting, and it being like an effective little wait because you're kind of like also waiting with them, like, oh, is something about to happen? Is something about to happen? You're kind of waiting for it to do the pin to drop. And I think there's a couple of moments in this movie, but the kid in the waterbed's kind of one of them because when he first feels something, he kind of sits up and he just looks around, and
Mhm.
there's a good, it gives it a good 10 seconds of him just looking around,
Mhm.
and that felt like a Conjuring movie to me, as opposed to just Curse of La Llorona. Like, so
Mhm.
I do actually think Michael Chavez, while I do think he is much weaker than James Wan, and I don't think he's a great director, I do think he at least tried to emulate what Conjuring 1
Mhm.
and 2 was supposed to feel like. You can tell it's an emulation. You can tell it's not James Wan, but there
Mhm.
are moments where he's clearly trying. So I can't fault him for effort at the very
I think he
least.
has potential. I think he has potential because he's, like I said, he's so early in his film career, and they really have given him a lot to work with to be this new of a director.
Yeah.
That's
It was probably cheap. Let's be honest.
yeah, yeah.
That's why you got the job. You're
Good point.
new, which means you're cheap.
Hmm.
We'll pay you $500. Is that enough?
Hmm.
It's really not, people. Just
Do you think? Do you think when Ed was possessed and he had the axe that was a nod to The Shining?
I can see that a lot, especially since those tunnels were very maze-like as well.
Hmm.
Uh, I will say I think that's when the cinematography kind of fell apart a little bit for me, was when they were running through the tunnel. One of the big things with action of any kind, and this includes horror, is that geography is so important. This is the thing that I always love to bring up, is that I need to understand at any given point where one character is in relation to another character. I need to understand distance. I need to understand all these things. And it became a bit too erratic at that point, which I get is intentional. I just don't think I like it as a technique. I think it's a technique that doesn't really work as well. Again, because there's a time and place for everything. There absolutely is. But it got a little too like I wish I always got the sense of like where they both were in these tunnels or how close he was to her. It kind of just felt like he was just always right behind her, as opposed to there being any kind of like real. When you watch The Shining, there's a real game of cat and mouse with that.
Hmm.
And there's a bit of cat and mouse in here. There's obviously some stuff with Lorraine fighting evil satanic lady, whose name I do not remember. And it's fine. I think I like the idea of the love being the stuff that breaks them, like breaks Ed out of it enough to like fight back and break the curse. That conceptually, I think, solid. The actual like chasing around and not just Ed and Lorraine, but also evil woman and Lorraine and everything else going
Hmm.
down there. It just felt a little bit sloppy to me, to the point where I couldn't enjoy it and like get like a clear like beat to beat to beat sequence out of it. So I wasn't as into
I agree.
that section as much, but yeah, which is a shame because it ends in the romantic moment where Ed buys the gazebo that
Hmm.
they fell in love under. They was in the rain and they had their first kiss when they were teenagers. And notably, I'm pretty sure, I didn't check, but I'm pretty sure that was Tassia Farmiga, her little sister, playing her younger self.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Which is a little
I
bit.
didn't even notice.
Which,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to do that.
however, is a little bit funny because it's in the same universe as the Nun. They were also
Yeah.
they were trying to hide her face a little bit because they're like, well, we can't imply that she's the same character that was in the Nun, so we have to like,
Hmm.
So she's got the kind of the old school, yeah, like 50s, yeah, given that it's the 80s, yeah, 50s hair,
Hmm.
and so they weren't being too overt with her face for the most part, I think, because they didn't want people to go, wait, is she related to? And she is in real life. That's her sister, but like not
Hmm.
in the movies. So, yeah. For a long time, I thought they were mother and daughter, which is no offense to Vera, but there's a big age gap. That's a bigger
Oh, yeah.
age gap than I would expect between siblings.
Yeah, I was saying that to my younger sister because we're similar. Vera Farmiga is in her 40s and Thais is in her 20s, and I have the same age gap with my youngest sister.
Oh,
She was a
really?
kind of a she was we didn't know we could still do that, baby. I mean, I was literally in college when she was born, and I wondered at the time when she was born, is she going to see me like I'm her sister or aunt? No, she sees me like I'm her sister. We have like the same same type of relationship any other older sister, younger sister. It's just she's part of a different generation. She's millennial, so we have certain things that we connect on, or other things I might have to ask her, well, what does that mean for your generation versus for my generation, because we might have different ways of looking at stuff. But what's great is she's very good at expressing herself and explaining. So I think that's kind of cool when you have a large spread for or generational spread with your siblings. It actually helps you interact with other people because you're already used to acting or interacting with someone from a different generation. I hope that made sense. I felt like I just went on a ramble that made no sense.
It made sense. It made sense. For the record, I am a millennial. I'm in your younger sister's generation, so
yes.
Yes. That's it for the old jokes this episode, but they're coming.
Yeah.
They're creeping up. They're creeping up.
Oh, from what I hear from Generation Z, you guys are already old. They said that you, with your skinny jeans, and I forgot what's the other thing that bothers them about millennials, but
I was never a skinny jeans guy, but I was the opposite. I had jeans that were far too baggy that anyone should be wearing when I was a certain age. What's funny though, I don't really see much from the Zoomer generation, right? But the one thing I did saw with them making fun of millennials, which I actually I side with them because I'm of the generation that should love this, right? But I'm not a Harry Potter guy. I never cared about it when it was coming out. But my generation was all about Harry Potter. So when I saw a Zoomer meme making fun of millennials, when millennials be like, "Oh, what house are you in? Gryffindor? Are you Hufflepuff or whatever?" I was like, you know what? I'm down with the kids because I hate this shit. I hated this the entire time. I had to hear it, and my own generation. Yes. So I don't know what point is of that, but yes. Millennials have their faults. I ain't denying it. Harry Potter being the main one. So yeah, that's basically the movie. I don't, I mean, I think it's. I mean, I'm trying to decide to myself if Ed's heart troubles are necessary in the movie. Like, do they amount to much outside of him having to just kind of let her? There's a couple of times in the movie where he has to let her go down the stairs into the basement on her own because he can't really take a flight of stairs, and it gives him maybe a bit of tension there. But other than that, I don't know if it really I don't know if I ever got the real idea that he might have a heart attack because he's pushing himself to. I don't know if I ever quite got that.
I think they might be setting up for future movies.
Well,
because
maybe.
as we know in real life, Lorraine outlives him. So they might be planning to actually have him pass away in a movie and then continue her story of what she did after that point. But they had to set up him having these heart problems so that it wouldn't come out of the blue when he does pass away that way.
Yeah. Although
that's the only sense I can make of it.
I mean, I'm very cynical about how much of any of what is supposed to be true in these movies actually being, yeah, I buy they went to a house, I buy they spoke to some people, but most of the movie I'm pretty sure is a movie.
Yeah, Hollywood. They have to dramatize things because even when you watch what's considered ghost hunting videos on YouTube, they're never as interesting as dramatizations of ghost hunting.
Yes. Yes, I think that's one of your boomer generation things is the investigation shows. You watch a lot of crime scene investigation and.
Did you just call me a boomer?
I did.
I'm Generation X. Boomer is the one before us.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I skipped the generation.
Yeah, they're the ones
that
fault. Told us that we will never. They said that we act like we don't ever want to grow up because we are determined to wear sneakers to work, and also that we do childish things like have collectibles.
Yes.
That's childish to boomers, but to Generation X...
Apologies, Generation X is
yeah, I'm convinced it was a Generation X person that came up with those Funko Pops. The Funko Pops with the little square heads, that's us. We like stuff like that. I don't personally like Funko Pops, so I have to get on my generation about that. I don't like them at all. That's why you don't see any here, but...
I hate Funko Pops. They are... They're the bait. Like it's the sort of thing where people assume because I'm a nerd, I'm going to like a Funko Pop. It's like, no, I
Yeah,
don't. I don't want a Funko. They look stupid. They're stupid. Those
yeah,
for the
I
big
don't like them
head.
at all.
Anyway, um, so yeah, Conjuring Devil made me do it. Is I don't think it's like a train wreck. I don't think it's like a super bad movie, but I don't think it's a good movie necessarily. I think it's a flawed movie that sort of works out in kind of a middle-ish territory. But I would probably still say it kind of squeaks above the rest of the spin-offs, like all the spin-offs. Like I still think it's above those.
I think it's more rewatchable. Like I think I'd be more likely to rewatch this than I would be to rewatch The Nun or La Llorona.
Do you know what I think? I think part of that, one, I do think it's generally better than those two, but I think part of it is because you at least have these two characters at the center of it who you do care about from the other movies, who are still played and performed with the same level of skill, and you still feel like you're watching Ed and Lorraine Warren that you've met in these movies, like going on. It's like any kind of weak sequel of a franchise where it's not that great, but I when I'm doing the trilogy watch, I'm still going to watch it. If there's a fourth one and maybe the fourth one's great, I'm not going to skip the third one to watch the fourth one. I'll watch all four. It's fine, That's kind of the vibe I get from this. That it's not great. It's not the best thing ever, but I'm not necessarily like super bummed out that it's not the best thing ever either. Like I'm not like angry at it the same way that I was with most of the spin-offs. So I guess I will ask the question, what would you rate The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It out of 10?
I would give it a 6 because I was never really bored by it. So I would say execution-wise, it's a great looking film. It's a great sounding film. My issue is with some of the writing.
Sure. Yeah, I think I would say a little more creativity in the execution, particularly how the probably just the narrative structure and how the direction kind of plays around with some of that, and maybe also keep Arnie more of a central focus, even though I do like the focus on the main couple. Those are my main critiques. Not all the scares are good. I do think some of them are actually solid, which was because I was kind of getting into this expecting not to like any of them, given the director and what his previous movie was. So they work out about 50-50, which is much better than I was expecting going in. I still like the two leads. I still think it's very watchable, and I do think it's a little bit long. I would have shaved 10-15 minutes probably if you could have. That said, though, that wouldn't be an issue if it was like if the script was tight. If it was 2 hours, then it'd be 2 hours and it'd be fine. But horror movies tend to be a bit shorter, so you really feel it when it's a week one, but it's still going longer. It's still like this is not that good. It should be 80 minutes or 70 minutes even. Why is it 120? This is torture. What are you doing to me? What are you doing to me, movie producer people? You bastards! How dare you? With that said, I think I'm going to agree with the 6. I know that's boring to just get the same score, but I don't think it's a super bad movie. I think it's still better than the spin-offs, and it's watchable, but it's definitely a fairly big step down from 1 and 2. But I have no problem rewatching this if I'm doing like a main Conjuring rewatch, because I'm never rewatching the spin-offs, so they suck. I'm not doing that. But I'll still get me watch this. Like I am many other horror sequels that aren't as good as the better ones. Like I always watch Friday the 13th Part 5 when I'm doing the Friday the 13th series. So, I'll do this one when I watch the. I would argue this is better than Friday the 13th Part 5. So that's the standard that we're going by. Better than Friday the 13th Part 5. The New Blood. Yeah, that was the title. No, A New Beginning. The New Blood was 7. Yeah, New Blood was 7.
So which is the one with the worm that was going into people? Was that?
Oh,
that was the final chapter?
Yeah, that was Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday.
Oh, Jason Goes to... Yes, I should remember that because that's the only one that I've seen in a movie. No, there's 2. I've seen that one in a movie theater, and I sasaw Freddy vs. Jason in a movie theater.
Yeah, that's the 9th one, which is the only one, for the record, that I skip if I'm rewatching the franchise. Because it's terrible, but it's also not even really a Friday the 13th movie. It's a weird possession movie that's not that good.
It has one good thing about it, and that was when I told the story in one of my videos, but when I saw it in movie theater, it was the movie that the very ending teased the Freddy versus Jason,
Yes.
because Freddy's glove comes up and grabs the Jason mask, and that's the one good thing about it. But we didn't get to see that movie come to fruition until a decade later.
Yep. Yep. Which was in my teen years. So I
Mm-hmm.
was actually too young to go to see Freddy vs. Jason in theaters, so I didn't get to go see it there. I mean, I was already watching those movies. I just
Mm-hmm.
couldn't technically go and see a movie like that in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Not for a couple of years at least. So it is what it is. Hey ho, that has been our first discussion on the Sacred Hockey Mask. Uh, Episode 1. Hopefully it went well and people have had some enjoyment out of this. I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers. You can go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us over there for as little as $1 per month. Our producers are one of the higher tiers, so thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Stanley. You can, of course, support us for as little as $1, like I said. You get a bonus episode once a month of our sci-fi movie podcast, and very soon this show, you'll get a bonus exclusive Patreon episode for $1 per month of the Sacred Hockey Mask. The first one coming lately in August, so look forwards to that. But you also get early access at the $5 tier and voting rights and other things. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. And of course, you can support everything that goes on here by simply hitting the like button and subscribing and dinging the bell for notifications and all that other YouTube jazz, which really does help. Would you like to promote yourself a little bit? Since
Oh
you're
yes.
since I snatched you from another YouTube channel, you can promote your home a little bit.
Oh, yes, definitely. My home channel is called What Did I Just Watch, where I review horror, sci-fi, and thriller movies. And I also have a podcast with Crystal Connor, and her channel is Wordsmith Crystal Connor, and our podcast is called Coast to Coast Horror, which we discuss horror from coast to coast and abroad. And I'm on one other project. It's called Hood Podcast, where we talk about news of the strange worldwide.
Cool. So there you go. Go check out that. And I'll tell you to remind me to put a link to your channel in the description. And if it's not there, it's because Shasha did not remind me.
Okay.
And it'll be added at some point. And once it's added, it'll always be there because I just copy and paste them every time. But once it's there, it'll be there. This has been the Sacred Hockey Mask. This has been our first episode. We'll be back next time with another horror movie that has been a recent or new release. And by recent, I just mean within the last 6 or so months, maybe a little bit longer, depending what it is. But that's what we'll mainly be focusing on outside of Patreon bonus episodes going forward. So, at least for now, things might change. And if you didn't catch the announcement from before, yes, when Tim comes back, this will run alongside Screams After Midnight. Both will exist. So you'll just get double horror content. So you have a happy time with that. So thank you very much for joining us once again. It is a pleasure. Keep watching scary movies. And remember that hockey season ended months ago.